Welcome back to iProgram's podcast, Mastering the Art of Program Management. Today's episode dives into the transformative power of AI and its impact on leadership, program management, and innovation. Joining our host, Dr. Bill Bersing, is Dr. Donald Wilson, a leader with over 30 years of experience in organizational strategy, sales, and marketing. From guiding national operations at Siemens Canada to mentoring future leaders and running his own consulting firm, Dr. Wilson brings a wealth of expertise to the table. Together, they'll explore how AI is reshaping industries, the practical ways to integrate it into programs, and what leaders need to know to stay ahead. Let's get started.
It's a long way home, thinking about that city of charm.
I wanted to talk about more of the artificial intelligence because we're doing a lot of this in the civil engineering world that I'm in. We attended a conference on artificial intelligence and civil engineering and came up with another couple of things in this legal contracting thing I did. Artificial intelligence, kind of a brief for law. It was a law firm that did it. They did a great job, and they expressed the importance of putting together a manual or documents to have something that says something about our policy for approaching artificial intelligence. And that's for everybody. And I don't see a lot of companies actually doing it.
Right.
Which
right.
is scary. Because
Yeah.
without that, I'm not sure where we are. And then we had another discussion because I'm on American Society of Civil Engineers of what we're doing with the nonprofit organizations and professionally, what do we do?
So we'll maybe just spearhead at that point. I'm on council at the Alberta Association of Science and Engineering Technologists. It's the Association of Science and Engineering Technology Professionals of Alberta.
There's an acronym there, or is that just?
Yeah, it's ASET, ASET. And I volunteered to be the chair of the AI committee to go out and sort of search out what's being done, who's doing what the engineering community is doing, what things are looking like globally for policy, legislation, and so forth. And so we gathered a ton of documents and came up with a bit of a repository.
I need to send you what that lawyer sent me.
Yeah.
And because
Yeah.
it's really, they put a lot of thought to it like you're doing, and it's on the point, here it is. Here's what our policy is. And it's 2-3 paragraphs and pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
So,
and
if you could send me what you got, I can do the same.
Very interesting that you bring out the topic of the legal implication, as we've just brought in Shores Jardine, the legal representative for Asset, into our meeting to chat about the legal implications, what were legal implications and so forth. And I don't know that the legal community has a consensus on what to really say about these things. AI came out like a shotgun, and all of a sudden everyone realizes, hey, there's some issues here we need to look at, but it's so early in the game. And the things that we can absolutely say, and I would say this from experiences, after using the LLM Chat GPT, the pay for model, it's very useful, it's very powerful, and it lies and it hallucinates. And you can get into a lot of trouble if you try to take it to a higher order response than it has the capacity to do. And one of the examples I would give, and I might have mentioned this before, Bill, is we deal in bid spec, where a consultant comes up with specification for a project that's going to be delivered, and the bidders come up with a response to that. And of course, it has to have a 360-degree response from products, services, legal implications, commercial side of things, and so forth. You cannot just feed those documents. Here's what our product, services, legality, commercial elements are, and here's the spec, and now make this match and get us a winning bid. It's so far away from being able to do that, at least chat is. As I work through this in a practical sense, I'm thinking we're really at the precipice of this even being usable as a higher order tool. So we need to look at it as a tool. And if we take any other tool we're using, whether that be a mechanical piece of equipment, we need to know its limitations are those boundaries that we can deploy or employ that tool. I know that's a pretty far-reaching, nebulous topic in response to what we're talking about. But I think those are the baby steps we have to be taking in this, is just, okay, what can it do? It can do this. It can't do a lot more than that, but it can do this fairly accurately and repeatedly. That's the way I've been trying to work through things. We bought a new car recently. It's a used Mini Cooper, and I needed to know some things about it. I asked lots of questions about the run flat tires, things like that. It kept coming back with responses that were 100%. Here's what the response is. And then later I'd find out that it was mixing things up or it was incorrect. And so you just have to have those sorts of boundaries with the sorts of things that you're using LLMs for. Which is not to say that LLMs are the end all be all of AI. What we should expect to have happen is that AI will be beneath the surface on many of the tools that we use. A good example of that is Outlook, where Outlook is starting to get some of the APIs, the application program interfaces with AI, that allow it to do things like respond on your behalf and in certain voice and so forth. So we'll see those sorts of things popping up fairly quickly. Virginia, I think you probably have seen that sort of thing happen already, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Have you been
And
using Copilot?
yes, I've been
Okay.
using Copilot, and I really like the functionality where it just makes suggestions for you. It doesn't write anything for you. It actually suggests how you can enhance your document or what you can do to make the language more acceptable to an email or the document you're writing. Yes, that is very good. Responding on your behalf, I'm a little like, how does it respond? Facebook and Instagram will ask you before you post, is this AI? You are legally bound to say that it is AI before you post. People don't, I'm sure there's tons of AI being pushed out in social media without that little toggle, but you're supposed to say if it's AI or not. And I like that. Starting, it's kind of like a place where we can start, where we can see what's human and what's not. I think
That's a good
that's
point. We got to
interesting.
figure that one out. The point about, hey, you have to have this as a policy is just, we have all this private information, social security numbers or whatever you have in Canada, people's birth dates and your mother's maiden name, all that.
Yeah.
If you have a document, a car document or whatever, and you put it up there, it's up there for everybody and their mother. Unless you paid for the paid subscription and then they kind of keep it. But if you have a company and you got like more than 5, 10 people, it's like, well, you got to make sure they're not putting proprietary stuff out there that customers or somebody can figure out where you are, what you're doing or how you're doing it. Yeah.
As an educator, at least from the college I'm teaching for right now, had a policy placed into the hands of the profs for furtherance into their courses, which basically said you do have some options on what you'll allow your students to do. And it was a 3-staged option set. One is no AI. The second is AI with some limited use. And then the third is full AI if you want to use it for research purposes, but you couldn't use it to actually write the paper or the response to an assignment. The real
What
key
fun
here
is
is,
that, man?
what's that?
Sorry. What
Which
fun is that?
college? Which one
I
is
think it would
that?
be super cool if I could use AI, like the full blown, to write the papers we had to write 10 years ago. Oh
Well,
my God.
well, yeah,
20 years ago. Yeah.
I agree if it was allowable, but then don't we get into a situation where we're not actually learning the content anymore? The key there was that they attached it very quickly to plagiarism.
Oh yeah, no,
Uh,
Mhm.
it's definitely.
if you're going to use a source and APA, now it's up to 7 or 8, APA clearly dictates how you need to cite that source and ensure that your reader can see where you got the information from accurately and as a primary data point, if you can. This is the sort of thing where if you got an LLM to respond on something and that's your source, you need to both tell the reader what your prompts were, what your AI source was, and actually, if you really want to do it properly, you have to take the sources that the LLM gives you and go back and look at those.
Oh
If you're
yeah, no, you
just
definitely have to. Because some of the
so
sources aren't the real sources. They're just
right,
referencing other things. This weekend, I had to look up some things for GSA pricing. And I said, what about this competitor? And what are their prices? And I put in
yeah,
AI and I'm like, okay, this is cool. And it gave me a little spreadsheet, gave me everything. And then I looked at the sources and it
yeah,
was definitely something that was out of nowhere land, YMC Enterprises. It was like, whew.
yeah.
I'm glad I
Yeah.
didn't use those people, but it was a cool little spreadsheet, it was a cool little way of presenting it. Yeah.
Yes, so those sort of micro levels of things that you can get chat to reply to that help you along with the exercises that you may be going through. I can give you an example of where I had a spreadsheet one time and it was laid out in a certain way, and I needed to take CSV data where you'd
Yeah.
have last name, first name, birth date, something like that. I forget what the data was exactly, and I needed to take it and spread it out amongst columns. And I didn't know what the shortcut key to do something like that was. So I asked Chat, here's the column, here's the
Oh my
data,
God. Yeah.
and give me the code to be able to take that data and put it into columns and do certain operations. It spit the code out. I threw it into the exercise area to the right. I forget what it's called, but the code area. And it did what I wanted it to do. Now, it wouldn't do it directly. I couldn't give it the sheet and say, here, can you convert this sheet? But it would give me the code to do it. That's where
The
we're at with
formulas,
some of
yeah,
this.
that's amazing. You
Yep.
forget what the function is, and you ask chat, and then you do it, and then, uh, you know, that's a tricky world that we're getting into, especially with plagiarism. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
I have a
So,
question for you with higher order that you were talking about not using it for higher order tools and then using it for more micro level tools. Can you give us some examples of where you would say absolutely do not in program project management, do not use, AI for these things. It will get you in trouble. And then some things that examples of where we can use it.
well, I was thinking about that a bit when I was going through the topics. One of the areas that is near and dear to my heart is risk management. It's a course that I outlined and have been instructing for some time. Organizational risk assessment is what the course is called. And I think that one of the things that you cannot do is go to an LLM and give them parameters and then to come back to you with an overall risk assessment of a project or an organizational exposure or anything like that. But what you can do is break it down into the pieces to say, create my initial risk register and then base that upon this, that, and the other thing, and then fill in some gaps where you see them, going back and forth and cycling that through to make sure that you have everything covered off. And then, as we normally do, get the team together and have a look at it and bring their suggestions forward. And then, as an iterative process, take that again back into the LLM and say, here's what we've arrived at. Do you see anything in that we've missed? I think that it can be a very reasonable tool, but to start from the beginning and give a minimal level of prompting on a project, and here are the parameters, here's the spec, and now come up with a risk register that's going to be able to be used from day one. I don't think you can do that. I had a paper written by Chat, and I gave it a lot of input. And it came back, and I was expecting something that would be about 100 pages, and it had like a page and a half of headings. And it thought that it had given me the full report. It didn't understand that it hadn't given me what I was looking for. So that's where I think the higher level human produced, or at least human intervention on product, needs to be observed right now. We cannot go to an LLM and expect that we're going to get a final output of something that is complicated. We need to break that down into components that we can then easily judge. I look at it more as an amplifier for any human's efforts, as opposed to something that would take the place. And I revert back to Scott Galloway's comment that I heard, and I don't know that he was the originator of this, but for those who think that AI is going to come and take your job, it's not going to be AI that takes your job. It's going
At
to be the
least not
person
now.
it's going to be the person using it that takes your job.
Yeah, it's a good point you had there. So, it's garbage in, garbage out. But the fact is, I've seen employees do it. I've seen them go down this rabbit hole where they're using AI, and it's like, okay, well, that's cool. And let me improve it a little bit. And then
Yeah.
you have like 10 questions,
Yeah.
but because they don't know the subject, at the end of the day, it comes up with garbage.
Yeah.
And some of it
Yeah.
makes sense. And then it's like, whoa, and then your head starts spinning.
Yeah.
So I don't know, without having that practical experience, where we are with AI improved. I know when I do it and I have papers and things that I feed it, even with the risk register, because I'll feed it a risk register, an Excel spreadsheet. Here it is,
Yeah.
and then I'll be like, hey, come up with 10 top risk register questions that we had based on our meeting minutes. And then I'll
Yeah.
put in the meeting minutes. And then they'll come up with something and then it'll make a little bit of sense. And then I'll throw in another couple questions. And by voila, I'll have 10 things that we need to focus on. That
Yeah.
made sense. It made sense before, but it took me literally 5 or 10 minutes to come to that conclusion, not 3 hours,
Yeah.
which I find really cool. But you couldn't do that unless you knew the subject matter.
Yes, exactly. I call it an amplifier. Have you seen any issues when you throw a document in and ask for something to be produced and it's not quite right, so you ask again, and it's not quite right, so you ask
Yes.
again, and
Yes,
each time,
it gets worse
Yes.
because you're
Yes.
garbage in, garbage out. It only knows what you gave them. So if you gave them the wrong information initially, and then you say, oh, no, I meant to give you this.
Yeah.
It's just like a person, they're going to say, oh, well, you gave me this thing in the beginning, so it has to correlate and it has to be there. And then it goes down this little rabbit hole and it gives you crap. And then we get to a point where you're like, okay, well, let me start a new chat GPT. Now, the chat GPT 4.0, whatever version it is now, is a lot better than Copilot. When it comes to this stuff, I can't even use Copilot to do half of the things I'd use chat GPT to do,
Yeah.
especially with the risk management stuff,
I loved
Yeah.
your suggestion and explanation behind having meetings and then having meeting minutes being produced. I guess you can do that with the meeting we're in right now too, right?
Yes.
So you can do it. You can just click Copilot and
Yeah.
Bob's your uncle. It says, here's our latest takeaway points,
Right.
whatever. Yeah.
Right. And you can drill down what were the to-do bits for these
Copilot's awesome
folks.
with
And
that. Yeah. it's
yeah,
really
yeah.
good.
I haven't used it for that quite
Yeah.
yet. I don't find opportunity too often, but
Let me tell
I
you
may
what
start
it
using
says
it.
here. Let me do it. I'll say top 10 points of the meeting so far. Hopefully it'll come up with something. Don shared involvement in the AI committee at the Alberta Association of Science and Engineering Technology Professionals, focused on global AI policy and litigations.
Nice.
AI limitations. Don and Bill
Nice.
discuss the limitation of AI, particularly in generating reliable outputs without human intervention and expertise. Don mentioned colleagues' policy on artificial intelligence education with options regarding the AI use to limited and full AI use for research purposes.
See, and that's a great example of where this technology excels, because that's truly what it is a large language model that is capable of understanding language and context. You didn't just read me back what I said. You read me back a
No.
summary of what I said, which is
Yeah.
probably better than what I said.
It's
So
weird. Yeah,
that's
no, sometimes.
that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
And then if you have a lot of meetings on the same topic, it'll tell you exactly what it is,
Yeah.
as far as, your conclusion over 2 or 3 meetings, not just the last meeting,
Yeah.
because it'll remember.
Let's move to leadership. That attracted me when I saw it near
Okay.
the bottom of the topic list. I know we're moving back and forth quite a bit. So I think one of the things that's particularly important right now within the team is that we start to investigate how we can employ and don't over-employ LLMs into what we're doing. In my former life was heavily in sales and marketing. And I think it's one of those areas where if you're in command of a sales team, you can quickly employ LLMs to do all kinds of different things, from prospecting, gathering of prospect contact information, offering letters, and all the way through to investigating why your win losses are a certain way they are, coming up with solutions for what you need to do to be more successful in sales. I don't think it can do all of that, because if it could do all of that, you wouldn't need the case that we'll always have to have human interaction on things that need to be complex projects and services.
Are you
need to
sure
be
though?
sold.
Because look at Tesla, look at the way they advertise. They don't have anything, completely ignored it. And then they have other people do it. I think they're doing some of it, but some of these companies are like, okay, what do we need it for? We don't need a big sales staff.
They can reduce the amount of human interaction that they have I haven't really looked into Tesla too much. Tesla's not huge here. It's here, but it's not huge here. And I have logged into their website, or not logged
Yeah.
in, but looked at it and seen, yeah, you just click here, 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 here. I haven't seen that that's necessarily a good sales model for us in Canada yet. It's probably an indication of things to come, but we're still dealing with things in terms of a dealership actually having a car on the lot for you. Most cars are sold based on inventory and not on custom order
Yeah.
websites. But so your point is valid for sure.
I
That
was just down in Georgetown and they had a lady with two Rivians. You know what a Rivian is? Electric vehicles, the trucks.
no,
It's like Tesla. It's amazing, vehicle. It's a
Okay.
US product and they're doing the same thing as Tesla. They don't have these huge sales forces and she's not even a representative of the company. She's just getting some type of commission off of whatever she sells. So it's weird. Not that your job is going to disappear because I think we'll always need that sales force, people, but how is that,
well,
how does
it's
it impact leadership?
referring to leadership within the sales organization. And I guess to take this a bit further into the customer specification, product specification through interpretation of the specification for comments and exceptions. Let me give the example of the Pittsburgh facility of the old Siemens LDA factory, whereby medium voltage drives were being custom built for a lot of industry here in Alberta. There's a lot of very high horsepower equipment used in the oil patch here. So between the customer specification all the way through to the factory production of the equipment was particularly complicated. The custom nature of the equipment and the fact that every process needed some little change here and there along the way was something that really needs to shrink before any type of automation of specification through delivery can be had. I didn't see any sign of that, even over the couple of decades I was with the organization. I saw no sign of customers wanting to standardize in any way the way they had things delivered. I would liken that to some of the projects that you've been involved in as well. Customers have specific detailed engagement between the engineering group, the commercial group, and so forth. You would have to have buy-in between the customer, the supplier, and all other elements in between, and maybe even past those endpoints to start getting into a Tesla style of engagement. I can imagine that the buying of a car that has a limited amount of options doesn't come anywhere close to the level of detail of some of the projects that you get involved in.
Yeah, we're trying to do that and we're not good at it. I think it's amazing once you're a part of it. It's a design build stage where you get the designer and you get to build the construction and you're at 60, 80%. And they're saying, okay, if we reduce this and we have some value engineering type things, we say, okay, let's pick this air conditioner. Let's go with Siemens because everybody on the campus is using Siemens. Let's do this. Let's do that. Those ideas are out there, but you cannot figure those things out without your customers' involvement. And that's the problem because they don't have enough time for us. Either that or they are typical. They can't understand the 2D or 3D drawings that we give them. Unless you walk through them and say, hey, this is what we're going to do with your lab. You're going to get the same questions, the same change orders, and you're not going to give them what they really wanted. And it would be great if we could do it in a way that we could say, hey, here's how we're going to build this thing. I know in Las Vegas, they had some ideas of here's the 3D scheduling where they'd say, okay, before the contract goes out for bid, they have a mock-up and then they show the construction companies how to do it. And that's kind of where you're headed. Here it is. Here's how we're going to do it. And then we got so many more bids in because they knew exactly what it was that we're asking them to do. Having that in conjunction with your customers ordering it would be another really cool thing to do. It's great if we could find ways to streamline that. But when you're doing one-off pump systems, or you're doing your stadium, whatever, for your, it's hard to do that customize or that one solution or your customers. This is it,
And it's a bit of a paradox. You've heard of SMR, small modular reactors,
yeah.
like the Westinghouse AP1000, and
Microsoft is doing them, right?
Yeah,
present.
what a paradox that is, because really what you're talking about is just that. Here is a module, a very complicated module, and you don't get to choose a whole lot of options on that thing. Here it is, it's 10 megawatt,
Yeah.
and it gets delivered, and that's it.
Doing it though, because we wanted to have a podcast on this SMR technology.
I did know that they were looking into SMRs for Fort McMurray, the oil patch, the oil sands up north from here in Edmonton. I'll look into it further, see if I can find some information. This is a technology that needs to be propagated across the world. The idea that nuclear power is a dangerous solution, I think some people are catching up with the inaccuracy of that notion. Especially with the types of reactors that we have now and the size of reactors we have now. But the paradox, of course, is that would be nice to have a similar size project as an SMR that
Yeah.
you could just pop in place. But you said competition a moment ago, and that's the real problem. We live in a marketing economy, and there's always going to be a customer who's going to prefer one product over another because it's better or because it's cheaper or because it's whatever that is. We'll always have these puzzle pieces that need to come together. Bringing it back to AI, maybe AI will allow us to characterize those puzzle pieces better and more accurately so we can bring them together and we don't have to spend as much time on the details in the front end midsection of trying to get these things solved.
We sell services, and it's really hard to
Yeah.
show the value of our services, so if it's $200 versus $100 versus $50 an hour of what you're producing and how you're doing it in the field with a quality assurance. I mean, it just really gets complicated to tell your customers, hey, we need $200 an hour because the machine is going and we have to support our people. And if you don't pay that, then you're just going to get somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, isn't supported, and it might put them at risk with safety and everything else. But how do you do that in the AI world?
Bring it to the practical element of it. What my service organization did in the drives industry for many years was T&M, and our rates were $500 an hour for high-end engineers to show up on site. The parts were extremely expensive, and when you didn't have a part on site and your pumper fan or process went down, you're losing millions of dollars an hour. So what we used to do is try to convince customers using data-driven evidence that if they just hired us on a contract as opposed to waiting until there were breakdowns, they could really save money that way. And it never flew.
It
no
never
one would
flew.
ever.
Okay, so we were like, you got to hire us before you get to the design and before you hire the designer or the construction company, because construction management is important. And here's statistically what happens. Nobody listens to us.
And some of the other solutions that we came up with that we thought would be no-brainers was we're going to monitor all your equipment, and using a really good monitoring system in the background, we'll be able to tell you not only that you have had a failure, but that it looks like you're going to be having a failure, and we'll get it fixed up in no time flat. Got caught up in exposure to the outside world on their equipment, internet, and other potential security issues, security threats. How do we wrap this all up in AI and make it better at this point? I'm going to say, okay, to analyze pieces and make sure that these pieces make some sense before we can bring it all together and go to the second order, third order, fourth order of things that we know will come. We know they'll come. We just have to be a part of that. And quite frankly, I want to be an active part of that. I'd like to be on the leading edge of assisting students, in the case of my students that I'm teaching right now, but also with respect to organizations looking to integrate AI into their leadership practices as well as some of their policies that are within their organizations.
Maybe it's the customer that needs to look at it when they need to reach out to a company like yours to get those services. Instead of you handling the data, you say, here's how you do it with AI. Just give me a call when you think that you're going to die.
Yeah.
With your products,
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
As AI
So-
becomes like more integral, what leadership qualities are emerging that are different than they were before? What have you noticed in your leadership style? How is it changing and how should it evolve with AI?
But I don't actually think that things change all that much. For decades, we've been looking closer at leadership with respect to change management, and we know a lot about it. We've got a lot of research. We understand the position that most employees have to any type of change are basically the 5 stages of death. The metaphor, we need to, as leaders, ensure that we're constantly creating this iterative process to bring in different policy, different tools to engage employees, to make sure that we give employees enough time, that we give employees time to innovate and use some of those tools to bring out new ideas, that we give them time to fail. As I wrote the most recent course I'm teaching right now, and it's the first time around, and it's a lot of fun. I understood that there would be some changes in the way that I'd be teaching leaders to innovate and allow innovation to permeate their philosophy and their organizations. What I did find is I was moving back to some of the very standard models that we use in creating strategy, which are the PESTLE, the SWOT, 5 forces, and bringing some of those details into the organizational strategic implementation. And so what do we need to do as leaders? More of the same, I would say. I had an interview with a person not too long ago asking the same sorts of questions for the course, and she pretty much replied with the same type of reply, that we just have to be open to ensuring that the changes we need to do are underway and in an iterative process to make things continuously improved within the organizational strategy.
Virginia, you just popped on a couple of things that have always struck me as funny. I encourage people to be innovative, and I've always wanted to hear the new ideas of employees. What do they think? How can we make it better? And then you get to a point where it's all change. If we accepted these innovative ideas, then it's change. So you have to be open enough to say, okay, well, we can make changes, or be fluent enough to make changes constantly, to do that agile project management type stuff, but into a point where you're pissing people off because people hate change.
Yeah.
My customers hate change. My employees hate change. If I'm going to change something, they're like, why are you doing that? We've always done it this way. I want people to be innovative, but they can't be innovative if they don't accept change. There's not change. All change isn't good. We have standard things for a reason. So I've created this whole owned and managed processes and procedures, and that way it puts them in charge of the change. You know, if they're in charge of the process procedure, then it's not me, it's them, it's the group of people who's actually doing the work. And I'm not the guy who's laying it out. So what is your thought to that?
It's a good point. I think of things like the Hawthorne effect.
Yeah.
If you put the change, especially at the planning process, in the hands of the people who are going to have to manage and operate within that changed environment, they will buy into it a lot more than if you just bring about a change and it's like, here it is, this is the change, it's on this sheet of paper. And there's ways to bring about change that make a lot more sense than others. If we take a militant point of view, we know that we're going to have poor results. If we bring about some level of engaging the employees, that is not just a trite survey to say, hey, do you like doing this? And then bringing it about and saying, hey, the survey says we should do this. More along the lines of discussing a problem with the team, coming up with ideas through brainstorming to ensure that everybody has a voice. Understand the psychometrics behind the team. We have some people who are very quiet and they don't really speak up too much. And we have other people who speak up a lot in the meetings, but we create some sort of reasonable way of facilitating those inputs so that we're getting everybody's input and they can see it, to come up with a suggested program that we need to implement, to look at that as another iterative process. And of course, the communication before, during, after, continually ensuring that those employees are in agreement. Now, if we're to do that and we're going to engage AI into part of these changes, we're also going to know that Mr. Smith, who is in a position for 45 years and really
Yeah.
likes the way he does things from beginning
Yeah.
to end, is not going to respond the same as Mr. Jones, who just started with the company at age 22, has a lot of favorite tools that came out of his gaming career. It's
So has
it's
the
just
tools
it's just
helped you, or
different.
what kind of tools are you using to have those meetings? Is it just Teams or Zoom, or do you have any other tools to capture information from multiple people?
I'll tell you, the types of tools that I use more often than not are a white dry erase marker board, post-it notes for voting. I like the idea of engaging people in person and ensuring that there is a full amount of contact when we're getting involved with things like strategic renewal and so forth. Now, needless to say, the last 4 years have
COVID?
changed things significantly, and I haven't been holding a whole lot of strategic renewal meetings by way of Zoom or anything like that. That was a bit of a former life for me, and I haven't done a lot of conversion over to remote engagement.
It's
So,
tough. Do you find that harder to
yeah.
do? Why haven't you done it?
Oh no, it's just
You don't get
it's
as
been
much out of it?
it's been a bit of a conversion in what I've done in my day-to-day life. About 29, I stopped the going into the office type of gig, converted to doing classes on the internet. I've done more asynchronous teaching and a lot less in-person work for the last few years. I have a bid out right now to do a couple-day strategy meeting with a local company. It will be in person. It won't be remote operated. But
Yeah.
that's just nature of the type of work that I'm doing right now,
I think we all need to get back in the meeting face to face a little bit more than we have been.
including school reunions.
Huh.
Have you gotten a hold with any of our classmates? Any more people? No.
No, just Peter. I think Dirk was going to reach out to Leslie, and it'll be one of those things where I'll tell two people and they'll tell two people.
I hope so. We got to get the
Yeah.
Phoenix alumni directory and get some help there. I'll reach out to him. I got to do some other stuff.
I have a question
Sure.
for you on AI and leadership qualities. What about quality control with your people when you know that they're using AI as tools? Do you think that as a leader, you have to maintain more quality control?
That's a good question, and I don't know that I've thought about that in detail, but let me give you an example of something that occurred not too long ago. Somebody was having a problem with a customer, and I asked this person, a bit younger than me, what did they say? And he said, well, they said this. I thought, well, that's unusual. Did you tell them this? Finally, at the end of the conversation, I said, you did speak to him, right? And he said, oh no, I was just texting. I think
That's a millennial thing, or
okay,
Gen
I'm
X.
not going to go on about that, but you're probably onto something. The point I'm making in that example is actually that we can't supervise employees directly all the time, but we have to find a language that we both agree on. And that can be challenging. And I think it also does speak to if some of our employees are employing AI much more than others, that we do have to be careful about how they go about employing it. And this goes back to my statement of let's do this in small chunks. Let's do it in bite-sized chunks that we can make sure are accurate. And then it's a culture issue. Let's make sure what we're doing is accurate. Let's make sure that what we're doing is ethical and moral. I don't know how many times I've found out in my career that an employee or somebody I was working with somehow got a hold of some information that was competitive information, but it wasn't public knowledge. And you have to drive that ethics gene in the organization to say, yeah, you can't actually do that. You can't get information illegitimately and then use that. You can get pricing online. You can find out from somebody where it's a publicly known bit of information. And so to me, that just comes down to you've got to drive the culture, you've got to be honest, you've got to drive ethics, In that, I think you have your best control of how employees are doing things, including, again, another tool like AI.
Mm.
So there's probably a lot more details to that. There's a lot more edges than just ethics, morality, legality, and so forth. I hope that answers part of your question.
Yeah. What excites you the most about AI?
I just like the amplification factor when I use it personally. I'm still at that stage where I haven't really deployed very much past myself and some of our learners in college. I have also shared that with my wife, who's also in love with it for things in the educational realm. You can take a student's paper, pop it in, and then look for specific points they're making. And so this used to be an absolute full read, and you might lose stuff. You have to go back. And so it's an amplifier. In that respect, it's an amplifier to be able to do it. You still need to read, but you can get to those points quicker. You can establish a grade for students. We were doing a project, and these are all just personal usages that have excited me quite a bit, but we're doing a siding project on the townhouses that we have in Kenora, Ontario, where we have our lake house. It's just a group of 14 owners that really don't know very much about siding. And so I got together with a contractor friend of mine and I started writing the spec. I used AI to fill in the gaps and make sure that CSA was looked after, some other building codes in Canada were looked after, that the products were put together properly. And, it's an iterative process, but it may have been something that I was able to do that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. And so that's excited me quite a bit. There's some obvious integration with AI that's coming up with tools that we already use. I mentioned to you, Virginia, the tool Descript,
Yes, we
which
use that.
Script completely changed the way that I do videos. I started using Descript just before I rewrote the course. It saved me so much time in editing. I can go back to it and continue to edit, of course, in the Word format. My rock band did an open mic the other day, and my wife recorded it on an iPhone. I threw it into Descript, and I was able to put together the entire string that way. Not the typical use of Descript for a musical number.
Right.
He's got to
And
get together with Taylor.
yeah,
He's another guy that we're working with here.
yeah, good. Yeah, let's form a band. We're getting the band back together.
Okay. Do it online.
And then, of course,
Yeah.
the Descript partnering with.
Yes, you sent it to me. I'm losing the name of it, but it's the video editor piece of it. The video streaming where you can record.
Right. It allows you to do multi-party recording over the internet. It gives you full resolution in the final product, even though it reduces the video that you see while you're doing the recording, Squadcast, for better bandwidth response while you're doing the recording. So yeah, it's a pretty exciting product. Just started using it to produce 1 or 2 videos. So those are the things that are exciting me. I got COVID again. Can you believe that?
I'm glad you're feeling
Again.
better.
Oh, I am.
You're doing okay though.
Yeah, no, I'm okay. I tested. It was a lighter bar today.
Oh my God, you still have it. Lighter
Still
bar. Oh,
got it.
sheesh.
Anyway, we had to all learn how to do videos, and that became just the beginning of it. I wasn't doing good videos at that time, but as things progressed, AI came out. So that's been really exciting as well. It's breathed a new life into some of the things that I'm doing now.
Cool.
Yeah, so I'm excited.
I appreciate
Well,
you taking the time.
I think we've come to a bit of a conclusion on this. Appreciate the time to be able to engage you folks.
Thank you so much.
It's a long way home, thinking about that city you joined.